I am always hesitant to share this story for reasons that may be obvious, but it's still the most bizarre and unsettling event that has ever happened to me. Worse yet, I still can't make sense of what happened or the conclusion of it. I was hiking in a pretty popular national park in New Mexico back in 2007. I was in the state for a friend's wedding and wanted to stop there before heading back home. It was late September, cool enough in the morning for a light jacket, and it warmed up enough later to not overheat with it. I like to think of myself as a fairly experienced hiker and rock climber, so I've always kept an eye out for interesting detours, ones that others less experienced may not consider checking out. About 2 miles into my trek, I noticed something that caught my attention. There was a cliff that hung over part of the trail that I was on, with vines and leaves growing up one side. It was clear that there had been some kind of water flow down the side, which helped to keep the vines alive. I wanted to see the view from the top, and after circling around for a bit, I found a good place to climb. Once up there, I could see that there was certainly a trail I could follow along, so I decided to continue. As I continued, I saw something else that caught my attention. A subtle path through the grass and fallen leaves, like someone had recently walked through it multiple times. Part of me thought I should stick to the marked trail, but at the same time, this was exactly the kind of thing that I liked to explore. If others had taken the path enough to leave a trail, there must be something worth seeing there, right? So that's exactly what I did. I followed the pressed down vegetation for about 10 minutes in total, taking mental notes of distinctive trees to help me guide my way back when I came back later. I don't know where the path would take me or how long exactly it was, but after about 15 to 20 minutes of walking, I found something I never would have expected to see. There was a little girl sitting there who couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on a dirty sleeping bag. She had several toys arranged in front of her. I remember seeing a dirty stuffed rabbit that looked pretty worn out and lopsided, a doll missing an arm, and other smaller toys. There was also a small red and blue lunchbox-looking thing next to her that had definitely seen better days. Her clothes were filthy, and they didn't look like they fit her properly. The jacket slung over her shoulders looked like it belonged to an adult woman. She did not have shoes on, and the bottoms of her feet were dark, clearly covered in dirt. Her hair looked like it might have been light brown, or maybe even blonde, but it was dirty, matted, and had leaves sticking out of it. I remember making an audible sound, a mix of curiosity and sadness, which caused the girl to stand up and face me directly. At the time, I was a preschool teacher and had experience with children. I knew how to calm them down and make them feel safe, but this was different. The fear in her eyes was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It reminded me of a feral animal seeing humans for the first time. I knelt and said hello softly. She backed up like she was ready to run. I put my hands out, trying to show her I was not a threat. I told her my name and slowly pulled my backpack around to the front, taking out the bag of trail mix I always carried with me. As soon as I pulled it out, I noticed her attention shift. She immediately approached and snatched it from my hands, opening up the bag and digging in. I watched her eat a few handfuls before I spoke again. I asked her if she was lost. She did not answer. I asked her for her name, and she stopped long enough to shake her head before continuing to eat. I asked her if she'd been out here alone, and she nodded. I asked her if she knew where her parents were or where she lived, but she gave no response. She just looked at me without answering any questions. The girl had to have been out there for some time. Surely someone had to be looking for her, right? Maybe she'd gone missing and miraculously managed to survive on her own. I don't know where the toys or lunchbox had come from, but they seemed to be the only thing keeping her going. The way she had them set up around her looked exactly like something a small child would do. Finally, I did my best to explain to her that I wanted to take her to the park rangers. I tried to make the rangers seem cool and helpful. After some coaxing, I got her to agree. I watched as she zipped up her sleeping bag, tossed her items into it, and dragged it along behind her. I took the sleeping bag from her and carried it, and she walked beside me, holding my hand. Her hand felt soft, but ice cold. I have had kids hold my hand or hug me before, but something about her felt very different. The walk back felt 10 times longer than normal. I think part of it was the weight of the sleeping bag, and occasionally carrying her so her little feet would not get hurt by rocks or sticks. We passed by a handful of people, all of whom looked at us judgmentally. They probably thought I was just a bad parent with how the girl looked, but not a single one of them stopped to ask if we needed help. When we finally reached the main trail, I explained to the girl what I was going to do, smiling to reassure her that everything would be okay. At the ranger station, I quietly explained to someone what had happened. They looked skeptical, but agreed to call for help. We sat on a bench outside, and I bought muffins from a nearby shop, which the girl inhaled. The police eventually showed up with a child caseworker. I explained everything to them, where I found her, what she said or didn't say. They asked me for details, but I told them that she would not speak at all. After another hour or two, they took the girl away in an ambulance while I finished giving my statement. I didn't get to say goodbye, but she kept the bag of trail mix. The caseworker took my contact information and said they would reach out if they had anything further. From there, everyone cleared out. I returned to my car and drove 4 hours home, stopping to eat by myself. The whole experience was surreal. I called my sister and a friend to tell them what had happened. They both agreed it was sad and bizarre. It would have been one thing to find a child lost on a trail, but she had clearly been out there for a while, weeks, maybe even months. The fact that she would not even speak raised so many questions. Was she just afraid? Was she mute? Could she even speak English at all? I had no idea. But what happened afterward made it even stranger. A week passed, and I had not heard anything at all from the caseworker, even though they specifically said they would contact me. I tried calling the national park, explaining the situation, but the person on the phone seemed confused. They said they'd worked there for years and had never heard of anything like that being reported. I explained that I was the one who reported it, not that I had heard about it. They brushed me off, saying that the area had dangerous terrain unsuitable for children, let alone hikers without experience. Frustrated, I tried the police station closest to the park. They told me the same thing. No record of a lost child being found in the park. I called 4 or 5 other stations, all with the same result. My last attempt was to contact CPS in that county. They took my information and promised to look into it, but I never heard back, not even once. When I called again a week later, the woman on the phone became aggressive. She told me that they could not give information to unauthorized individuals or people not in the family. Then she told me not to call again. I understood that they could not tell me about the child specifically, but I was more concerned about her well-being. Did she get lost? Was she abandoned? What had she gone through? Why didn't anyone seem to remember what happened that day? It wasn't something that should happen regularly, so why was everyone so quiet about it? The only thing I could conclude was that people were told to stay silent. But why? Who was that girl, and why did it all become such a big secret? Hey X, I've been a long-time lurker on other boards. This is my first post. I'm getting married to a woman I've been with for the last 5 years. She believes in ghosts and other paranormal crap like that. Keeps weird crystals to ward off bad spirits. I don't believe in a lot of that, but her father said something to me on his deathbed. He died 2 months ago. I'll post what he said and the story he told me. Him and I were both Boy Scouts in our youth, and we both went to Philmont. It's a huge ranch in northern New Mexico that the BSA use for an extreme hiking experience. I'm going to greentext my experience, and I'll greentext his too if you guys want. Be me, 2011, 15 years old from Alabama, in bus going through northern Texas. It's night, looking out on the highway. See what I think is a huge coyote. Think, everything is bigger in Texas. Next day arrive at Philmont in base camp. They have these gates, only ways in and out of camp, made of big totem poles. Excited, about to hike over 100 miles in a week and a half with guys I've known my whole life. Get assigned woman ranger. She's going to be our guide for the first 3 days. Get on bus. They drive us out on dirt road for maybe a few hours. Drop us off an hour before sundown. Hike half an hour, make camp, make first dinner. 3 dads with us. Mine's one of them. They go to sleep at like 10. Me and the other guys too giddy to sleep, so we're around our fire telling stories. Ranger goes to bed. Comes back 30 minutes later, looking weird. Like she was wrong. Looked like stuff crawling under our skin. Tries to get us to go with her to the woods to find a nearby outhouse. They had one near every campsite. We all say no. She starts getting weird, so we all go to bed to get away from her. 4 a.m. I have to piss. Peek my head out. Oh fuck. The reindeer is still sitting near the dead fire now. Shut tent and death grip knife. Something was making me panic, and I could not figure out why. Next morning, Ranger makes a joke about how we must have seen a ghost because we were the first group that went to bed the first night. My face went. She acts like we are crazy when we ask if she doesn't remember. Next days are weird. I've known these guys my whole life, and they are acting wrong, fighting, and just doing stuff they wouldn't usually do. Third day, Ranger left. Fourth night, I have to piss real bad. Wake up tent mate to come with me. Walk out into woods to piss. Pissing. Look up and see a creature that has no right existing is looking at me. It was the top half of that coyote I saw in Texas, but it has antlers. It stands up on its hind legs, and it has a nude male lower half. Tactically shit my pants. Tell tent mate not to turn around. Lock my arms with his, back to back. Have him lead me back to camp while I stare at this fucking thing. Get into tent. Get my dad's machete out of his bag. Luckily, he didn't put it in the bear bag. Death grip machete all night long. Next morning, huge fight between everyone. Gets so bad, I and a few other guys start punching each other. Next week, we are all constantly fighting. While on the trail, we keep coming across half-eaten deer. Philmont also has free-range livestock cows and shit. Third to last day, come across a dead cow in the middle of the trail. The corpses are off. It couldn't be bears, there was too much meat left on the bodies. Second to last campsite, we get there, and there's a 10-point buck's head in the trees near campsite. Father is in the army, so he decides he will stay in a campsite a mile down the trail. Get there, everything is normal, other groups are there too. That night one of the other group's bags got ransacked, and their bear bag was ripped out of tray. Next morning, nope out of there without breakfast. Last campsite, nothing happens. Last day, longest distance we have to go, we'll literally walk back into base camp. The day goes normally, no fighting, and no dead animal bodies. We are walking through the north entrance. We get through it, turn to friends behind me, start to apologize to them. That's when I fucking see it. Huge coyote on hind legs, with human arms fucking waving at me with what I assume is a smile. Year later, Dad's job moves us to East Texas. Dad buys McMansions out in the boonies. Everything normal. Meet future wife. Start dating her. Weird shit starts happening. Find dead animals on road. See coyotes. Finally graduated high school. Moved to nearby city in my first apartment. She moves in. Meet her dad. Parents separated. Cool old hippie. Have him over for a few weeks at a time. Me and him click. Talk about everything with him. Tell him how I was a Boy Scout. He asks if I went to Philmont. Say yeah. Under his breath says, that's where I met it. He gets quiet, won't talk much anymore. Next day take him home. We get to his house. He hands me one of his rings. It's a metal biker skull ring. Tells me to wear it when me and his daughter go out. Don't hear from him for 2 months. One day, getting groceries with future wife, she gets a call from her aunt. Her dad was in the hospital. He had gotten bitten by something and didn't tell anyone, so his leg had sepsis. Wife has to go to hospital to sign paperwork, power of attorney. They amputated his leg. When he gets up from surgery, he is unbelievably upset. Says he can't fight it off now. Fight what off? He quits eating and talking. They put in a feeding tube and put mittens on his hands so he can't take out the feeding tube. He somehow gets mittens off, rips out feeding tube. Get call from doc. He has maybe a day left to live. Wife is upset. Go see him. He won't talk to her. She runs out crying. Get mad. Get in his face. He grabs my arm. Says, you have to protect her from it. I know you saw it at Philmont. It's followed me my whole life. You have to protect her. Keep that ring on you at all times. Then he lays back and does not say another word. Leave. Comfort wife. Go home. Next day he dies, and we get him cremated. Keep his urn on the mantelpiece. Have memorial for him at his best friend's house. On way there, wearing the ring he gave me, something huge darts across the road. Wife thinks it's a dog. Dogs don't get that big. While at memorial, his 2 ex-wives show up. The first, not my wife's mom, starts going on about how he never wanted to move out of the city. Goes on about how he was always burning sage and shit like that. Starts talking about how dead animals would show up on the doorstep. Wife starts getting upset, so me and her dad's best friend / wife's godfather ask ex-wife number 1 to leave. Wife's grandma outlived her dad. While we were there, she pulls me on the porch under the excuse of a cigar and a cigarette. Hands me this tiny old buck with no writing on the cover. Says it's wife's dad's outbuck. He took it with him everywhere. Tells me he told her about Philmont. Tells me what happened to him. Tells me I have to take care of wife because she's his only daughter and the creature is out for blood. Go back inside and listen to stories about the guy. Notice a pattern about him. He always preferred the city and kept his distance from almost everyone except his mom. Memorial ends. We start to head home. It's dark now. Get halfway home and there's a dead hog, which is weird because the nearest wild hogs are over 100 miles away. Go around it and bullet home. Get home. Wife goes to bed. I stay up and open the book of John. A note with a combo and B25 written on it falls out. On the back, a storage unit place is written on it. Show wife. Go to storage unit the next day. Pay the desk for the final payment and go open it up. Filled to the brim with old boxes, food, and suitcases. Start going for the stuff. Start finding weird shit. Swords, knives, a notebook filled with incoherent writing, and newspapers. Every local newspaper from 1987 to 2008. Throw most of it away. Find wife's old baby stuff. It makes her happy. Keep bitch and sword. On the way home, I hit a coyote with the truck. Even in some of the cities, wildlife creeps in. My inner hick kicks in. That's a good pelt at least. Pull truck over, hop out. Go examine coyote with my pocket knife out. Get close. It has fucking human hands. Bolt back to truck. Wife does not know why. Starts to ask me what's wrong. As I peel down the highway, just say it was too mangled to salvage. Relatively normal for a month. Yesterday, I'm getting up to go to the gym before work. Walk into front apartment patio. There's a fucking dead coyote. Rush back inside and grab my machete. Go back out and roll it over. My face when, no human hands. Grab trash bag and gloves because can't skin it on the porch and take it to dumpster. On way to work after gym, notice an old man staring at me from the sidewalk. Something is wrong about him. I just can't put my finger on it. He smiles at me, the same smile that Finn gave me my last day at Philmont. Instantly go home, call out of work for the rest of the week, and barricade apartment. Luckily, wife is between jobs, so get her to stay with me. This is the first chance I've had to slip away from her to post. Do you guys have any idea what this thing is and how to get rid of it? Some OC, not gonna green text it. In 2018, I went hunting for the second time with my childhood friend, Marty. I've known this man since pre-kindergarten. We went hunting somewhere in Alabama on some property owned by this guy named Mr. Bradford. The owner was nice, had a real thick Southern hick accent, but was very kind, and had a married lesbian daughter. Seemed proud of her. I had hunted on this land the year prior with Marty. On our first hunt together, he shot and killed a buck he had been tracking for over 5 years. On the second hunt, I shot and killed my first 8-pointer buck. It was a nice hunt, but in 2018, some storm had hit that area and the whole region had some bad floods. When I got back in 2018, it did not feel the same. On the first night, Marty let me borrow one of his rifles and put me in this green patch. He was comfortable with me being by myself while he hunted in a nearby patch maybe less than half a mile away. The shack I was in was real small. It could hold maybe 2 people. It was just plywood for the most part, with really shitty plastic sliding windows. There were 4 windows, 1 on each wall. 3 were big, and were obviously made for putting the gun through, taking aim and shooting. But the 4th was a small window by the entrance/exit, so you could see what was behind you. The door was loose and was locked in place by a swivel hook. When Marty dropped me off and drove away, I sat there for maybe an hour, just enjoying the scenery. To be honest with you, I wasn't going to shoot another deer. I was looking for a hog to shoot, but wasn't really itching to kill anything. It was maybe around 5:30 p.m. The sun was still above the horizon, and it was still bright. All of a sudden, I noticed it was dead quiet. The birds chirping, the wind rustling, the leaves, all of it stopped. I felt tense, super tense. I immediately thought about the skinwalker stories, and I made sure that my rifle was ready to fire. I even pulled out a knife and closed all the windows. I did not know what to do. I just had this instinct tell me to stay fucking put, despite how much I wanted to run to Bradford's house, which was closer to my hunting patch than Marty's location. I did not smell anything, but I started to hear something approach my shack from behind. It wasn't an animal. It sounded like something was cautiously approaching. Imagine a hunter slowly stalking the woods with his gun, ready to fire, except this was not a hunter. I hear these footsteps softly crunch the leaves underneath until they stop behind me. All that stands between me and this fucking thing is this thin door. I'm clutching the knife in my hand because I feel like I'm not skilled enough to quickly turn and shoot. I then hear it breathe right behind my head, just behind the door. It's the heaviest exhale I've ever heard. Imagine a boar exhaling after running several miles, but followed by a 10-second pause with no inhale. That's what I heard. It sounded huge. It sounded heavy. It sounded dangerous. For some reason, a voice told me to keep staring ahead and to not look behind me, to not even glance at the window to my rear. I did not even want to look to my right or left. I stared ahead at the fucking one tree standing in the middle of the green patch. I don't know how long it was there, but eventually I stopped hearing it. Then the silence was filled. The birds came back. The wind blew again. When it did this, I finally opened the door to the back and looked around. There was nothing. No footprints, no trail. Nothing to signify this thing was even there. I tried texting him, calling him, and even using Snapchat, but I had no service. He told me he would come get me at sunset, and I did not feel safe running back to the main house with how far I was, so I stayed put. I felt like that thing was still out there. Nothing remarkable happens next to me. I did hear a gunshot from Marty's location, and he came a little later than I wanted, but he said he tried shooting a deer but missed. When he picked me up, I waited until we were in his truck, driving back to our little house until I told him. With the doors locked, I told him everything, and he believed me. Even more than that, he told me that his little brother, Danny, had something happen to him like that as well on the same property, but in a different location. He said one night, Danny went hunting by himself, with a raised shooting house. He said he and his dad eventually got their phones blown up by Danny, demanding they come pick him up together. When asked why, he just panicked. When they got there, Danny said he heard someone or something just approach him, but just stand directly underneath his shack and never move. It freaked him out so much that he called them to come rescue him. Marty had some creepy stories as well, but nothing similar to me and Danny's experience, and, honestly speaking, I attribute the shit he went through to being sleep deprived after a 2-day hunt. I'm not sure what I experienced, but it was the most tense I've ever felt, and it activated something deeply primal inside of me. I refused to ever go back. In the end, Marty just ended up buying his own land where he now farms and hunts with his family, so they only went back to Alabama to pick shit up, and that's it. If that was a skinwalker, why did I not smell the copper that people talk about? Why heavily breathe next to me and then simply disappear? What the fuck was it? Why did every synapse in my body tell me to bunker down and not look at it? Hi folks, this is a story from my grandma. She is still all well alive, as well as Gramps. Sometimes she asks me questions about my life and education, and one day just asks, "Since you are a scientist, do you believe there is something more?" I'm an actual scientist. I say that I am 100% sure as the universe is vast and there are things I won't be able to explain in my lifetime, so she just proceeds to tell the following story. It was just after World War II. Her uncle or similar kin were going through a village looking for abandoned houses in a group of a few people. This is northern Poland, near the town of Morag, in one of the villages where she and Gramps later settled, just like their next of kin. There were some Germans left, usually widows or people who could not or refused to leave. Locals were treating them in all manner of ways, but this story proceeded as follows. We'll just call the uncle Roman by his name. Roman and Guy's Rome village. Go to the bit more secluded part, off the main road. Most houses empty, Germans left. In one house they see a woman. They wave at her. She is in the attic window. She quickly walks away from it, so they go into the house. Cannot see her. Roman proceeds to the attic. Door is shut, but bars easily with help of his brow. They get upstairs. The woman hangs on a rope, hung herself, still convulsing a bit. Try to get her down ASAP, but she dies right in front of them. She was German, likely thought they were Russians. Most Germans can't tell the difference. Was probably afraid of what they would do to her. Church and village survived. They take her down and carry to the church. Explain to priest. He says they can bury her the next day. Since house was not abandoned, Roman and co decided to stay the night. Attic has a bed. Bottom floor has 2 more beds. Guys light a fire in the yard to warm food, since night is good. Roman says he is tired and will take the attic bed. Goes to bed, gets into the attic, hears shouting from outside. Roman. Pissed off, gets to the window and says, "Let me sleep, morons." Guys say they are silent. The hell is his problem? Shrugs some bitches about the bros and goes back to bed. Hears Roman again, but silent. Gets pushed down on the bed, as if someone sat on him. Cannot breathe. Roman. Sees nothing. Cannot move. Gets pushed so far down, the bed starts to squeak and crack. All 4 stops in a second. Roman jumps out of bed. Runs to the window. Guy's still there. Runs downstairs. Asks the guys if they heard his name being called. All Pikachu face. Decides to sleep downstairs. Bro sleeping upstairs afterwards. No issues. Next day bury woman. Go back to house. No further activity. House was abandoned a few years later as village shrunk and people left for a better location in the village. They never complained and even said it's a pity they had to leave a large house. Mothman sightings in Michigan. As a child, I saw the Mothman more than once. I'm pretty certain anyways. It was around the early 2000s, and I was in the woods with my friends and some family members. The sun was setting, around 4 to 6 p.m. in the summer. We split up, and I remember hearing a very distinct, loud sound. It sounded very bass-like, low, but very distinct. One of my younger brothers said he saw a bat flying through the trees, and I was looking around, trying to find it. I looked up at a giant tree and saw a huge pitch-black figure blending in with the branches. It had huge, pinkish eyes, but they were dark, almost maroon. We all saw it, and it did not move. It was huge, looked mutated and unnatural. I think it was feathered, but it was too dark to fully capture its texture. We never saw it fly away, it just stayed there. That was the first time. The second time was around 2013 at night, where I saw a similar looking figure just before my brother was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. I saw it flying, had a huge fucking wingspan. I remember its eyes were a lot brighter than before, more red than pink. Pic related, captures the scene of the first sighting. The creature depicted is accurate to what I saw. Same color scheme, same eyes, same posture. It's pretty much been ingrained into my memory. It looked around 5'9" in height.